presentation at American Indian City Hall went well. Although we had two.
We are now live streaming. We are live streaming.
Thank you. And we're almost at 1:30. We're at 1:29, so we're counting down. There it is, 1:30. I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is the NVTA Board of Directors, Tax Authority Board, and it is 1:30 on this March 2024. Mayor Sedgley, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Thank you. Please stand if you are able and join me in the pledge. The pledge of allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do we have any, it shows number 3, consideration and approval of board member request for remote participation. Is there any remote?
Do not.
Okay, thank you. Please go ahead and start with roll call.
Leon Garcia. Mark Joseph.
here.
Donald Williams. Kevin Eisenberg.
Here.
Liz Alessio.
Present.
Scott Sedgley. Alfredo Pedroza. Ryan Gregory. Paul Doring.
Here.
Anna Shuto. Margie Moeller.
Here.
Robin McKeecan.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Excellent. And number 5, adoption of the agenda. Do we have any changes for the agenda? Otherwise, we have a motion to adopt the agenda.
Move to adopt, Garcia.
Thank you.
Joseph, second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, that's unanimous then. Moving on to item 6, and this is public comment. Do we have any public comment for the NVTA-TA? Not seeing any in the lobby, in the chambers, I mean.
We do have a hand raise on Zoom. One moment.
Thank you.
Justin, go ahead.
Good afternoon, and I just want to just make a little brief comment. On April 12th is a cutting ribbon. Hope I will be there, and I had somebody just email me today. So cutting ribbon is gonna be on April 12th at 10. Thank you.
And what is the ribbon cutting for?
It's a new Bashar new mitten. Napa Vine.
Oh, the maintenance facility. Okay, thank you so much yes, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Any other public comment?
No.
Not seeing any. Excellent. Moving on to chairpersons and board members update. I don't have an update. I just want everybody to know that we have often, well, pretty much every our board meetings, we've got a couple board members that need to leave promptly for other boards that they participate in. So we may lose quorum starting at 3:40 or 3:30 even. So just want to be mindful that we'll move through the agenda swiftly and for staff to go ahead and make your presentations quickly too. And then any other board member updates? Not seeing any? Okay, thank you. Do we have an executive director update?
We do, very brief. First of all, we have a measure letter, Measure U. And last night, staff, including myself and Danielle Schmitz and Adrell Coleman, attended the City of American Canyons Council meeting and presented Measure U to an ovation from the audience, which I thought was sweet. So I don't think it had anything to do with my speaking capabilities. It had more to do with their enthusiasm to improve infrastructure. And that concludes my report.
That's a very good report. We love that. Excellent. So moving on to number 9, and this is 9.1 is a public hearing, and this is an action item. Public hearing on the first reading of the Napa Valley Transportation Authority Tax Agency biannual budget for fiscal years 2024, 2025, and 2025, 2026. Antonio Honorado is going to present this.
Yes. Do we have to open up the public hearing?
Oh, yes, we probably need to make a motion to open the public. Do we have a motion to open the public hearing? I announced it, but go ahead. Okay, so we had a motion by member Sedgley. At second by Shuto, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any nays? Okay, thank you
Great.
very much.
So,
Unanimous.
good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Antonio Honorado, and I am the Director of Finance for the Napa Valley Transportation Authority. So for this public hearing, staff is asking for the board to review and provide comment on the fiscal year 2024-25 annual operating budget of the Napa Valley Transportation Authority Tax Agency in the amount of $31,560,300 for that year, and then also to review and provide comment on the fiscal year 25-26 annual operating budget of $32,245,100 and approve resolution 24-01 TA adopting the fiscal year 25 and 26 budgets and associated annual appropriations limits. If you could go to the next slide. So staff is presenting the two-year biennial budget financial program for the fiscal year ending in 2025 and 26 for review, comment, and adoption. The budget itself is pretty straightforward. The tax agency is currently a pass-through entity. Revenues come in on a monthly basis and they're distributed at the end of the quarter. This slide provides a brief overview of Measure T's revenue history. At the commencement of Measure T, actually 5 years ago, the agency received a little over $19.7 million, with 99% going to the jurisdictions. There was about $1 million dip in the second year due to the pandemic, and revenues have been on a upward trend ever since. Including the current year, revenue growth is trending at around 6% on average. For the current year, I expect revenues to come in at or around 1% over the previous year. So there is a little bit of a flat line there, and it's because of the current economic challenges that we are seeing today. And many of your jurisdictions probably have starting to see some of those economic headwinds materialize in your own cities and towns and the county level. Since the budget is a spending authority that the board must approve, staff budgets Measure T revenues higher than the expected forecast. So if revenues come in higher, they will pass through quickly to the jurisdictions to basically, so there is no time or delays in getting the proceeds to the jurisdictions. So really, for the next 2 years of the budgets, as you can tell from the fiscal year 24 forecast, which is the third column next to the right, you'll see that the budgeted 2 years budgeted revenues are about 20% higher. Now, realistically, the revenues will come in at around $26-27 million, but we have a wide buffer that way that if revenues do come in higher and the pass-through does come in at a higher level, we don't hit this budgetary wall based on our accounting system. So it means that the jurisdictions will get their proceeds much faster as opposed to waiting for a delay, coming back to this board, asking for your approval to give you your money, and then go ahead and start the process of giving you your last disbursement. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to go through the rest of those slides. You have the PowerPoint presentation in front of you, but the rest of the slides are on a consolidated budgetary basis for the next 2 years out. It does provide the history, and it does provide the budgets for your respective cities, towns, and the county, as well as a forecast of what those future years look like. And if there are any questions regarding budgets or forecasts, of course, your public works or your finance directors can call our offices of here and we'll provide you. We do have long-term plans, out to the end of the measure. So we do have that information for any kind of planning purposes. But in this case, we're asking for this board to approve the budgets for the next 2 years, fiscal year 24-25 and 25-26. And with that concludes my report, and I can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. And I want to thank staff for providing this handout, though I don't see the page for City of Napa. Maybe I'm just missing it with the spreadsheet. It's right there. I see county. I don't see City of Napa on here. But that's okay. We've got it in our packet. Do we have any questions by the board? Not hearing any questions. Is there anything in terms of public comment? Not having any public comment either. So this is quick. If there are no questions, so we've got two items that, well, one action item, and that is to approve the resolution number 24-01T adopting the fiscal year 2024-25 annual operating budget and the fiscal year 2025-26 and associated annual appropriations limit. That is the action.
I'll make that motion, Joseph.
Okay, we have a motion. Did you want to say something, Antonio? Okay, we have a motion. And we have a second by Gregory. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any nays? Not seeing any, so that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving on to the consent agenda. Oh, thank you very much. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing? Moved by Joseph. Second by Setchley. All in favor, please say aye. 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 Any nays? Okay, thank you. Thank you for that prompt. Moving on to our consent agenda, items. We only have one, and that's 10.1, which is the meeting minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved, Joseph.
Moved by
Second,
Joseph,
Garcia.
second by Garcia. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any nays? Okay, that passed unanimously. Now on to 11, our regular agenda items. 11.1 is an action item, Measure T fiscal year 5-year project list. And Adrell Coleman is going to present this.
Hi, good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Adrell Coleman. I'm Assistant Planner and Analyst here at Napa Valley Transportation Authority. I'm here to present agenda item 11.1, the 5-year project list. So let's begin. Next slide, please. Oh, there we go. To secure funding from Measure T, jurisdictions are required to submit a 5-year project list which outline proposed projects, cost, and funding sources every 2 years. Approval of this list requires a public hearing be conducted by each jurisdiction's governing body and that a resolution must be signed. Once approved, the list is submitted to Napa Valley Transportation Authority for further review, followed by a presentation to the ITAC for evaluation. Final approval rests with the NVTA-TA Board of Directors. Measure T funds can only be allocated to projects listed on an approved 5-year project list. Just to note, the odds that a jurisdiction would be able to complete all projects on a 5-year project list in a 5-year span is highly unlikely. The reason so many projects are listed is to give jurisdictions the flexibility in case of unexpected challenges or obstacles with cost or design issues. For example, jurisdiction was able to complete a project significantly under budget, and they were able to roll those leftover funds into an unplanned project. On the other side, jurisdiction had to shelve a project due to the cost being much higher than the initial estimates. So once again, that just provides flexibility for the jurisdictions. Next slide. So we'll just quickly cover an overview of the list for each jurisdictions, starting with the City of American Canyon. They had 89 total projects listed. Total project cost is $12.8 million. Measure T funds account for $10.5 million, with other funding sources just over $2 million. Project categories include full reconstruction, mill and overlay, and Cape Seal projects. Next slide. City of Calistoga had 48 projects listed. Total cost was just under $20 million, with Measure T covering roughly about 20% of the project costs at $4 million, with other funding sources coming from local and state funds. Their project categories were road reconstruction, safety projects, sidewalk repair, and pothole patching. Next slide. City of Napa, they had 25 projects listed, total cost of $55.6 million. All projects would be covered 100% by Measure T funds. The reason they have their project total is so low is because usually they group entire neighborhoods together as one project. But their project categories included pavement, preventative maintenance, pavement repair and replacement, concrete sidewalk maintenance, repair and replacement, stormwater facilities, and plants, trees. Next slide. County of Napa had a whopping 216 projects listed. Total cost is just under $80 million, with Measure T covering about 64 million, so roughly 80% of the total project costs. Other funding sources is $15.2 million from local and state funds. Project categories included road reconstruction, road overlay, road seal, bridge replacement, and bridge repair. Next slide. City of St. Helena had 75 projects listed. Total project cost was $13.3 million. Roughly $10 million is funded through Measure T. Other funding sources is $1.2 million, and maintenance of effort funds is 2.7. Categories included road overlay, storm drain repairs, crosswalk safety, curb ramp replacements, and microsurfing projects. Next slide. And lastly, we have the town of Yountville, who had 63 projects listed. Total project cost was just under $4 million. All projects will be funded through Measure T revenues. Their categories included overlay and striping, rehabilitation, dig out and microsurfing, and grind and overlay. The next slide. So that concludes my presentation of the 5-year project list. I'm now happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Adrell. Very good. Do we have any questions here at the dais? Member Garcia, did you have a question? No?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, very good. Do we have any public comment on this? Okay. Then we have a motion. Since this is an action item, there's a recommendation by staff, the Napa Valley Transportation Authority, Tax Authority Board review and approve the jurisdiction's 5-year project list for FY 2024 through 2029. If we have a motion?
I'll make that motion, Joseph.
Joseph made a motion. Second by Doring. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any nays? That passed unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to 11.2, this is an action item. This is a maintenance of effort certification fiscal year 2022-2023. Adrell, you're also going to take us through this?
Yes.
Thank you.
This will be a very short presentation. Once again, good afternoon, members of the board. Adrell Coleman, here to present agenda item 11.2. Which is the MOE Maintenance of Effort certifications. So Measure T establishes a maintenance of effort, which is a minimum spending threshold for jurisdictions regarding local streets and road maintenance. This is based on the average expenditures from fiscal years 07-08, 08-09, and 09-10. This is to ensure that Measure T funds supplement, not supplant, existing efforts to maintain roads. Jurisdictions must submit documentation annually to certify that they've met their maintenance of effort requirement. This is done by taking a resolution to their governing body along with supporting documentation detailing how they calculated their MOE for that fiscal year. Submissions are due by January 31st of every year. To NVTA staff. Staff then compile a report to be reviewed by the ITALC, and then the ITALC recommends that the certifications be reviewed to the NVTA-TA board for approval. Next slide. Here's just a quick snapshot of the maintenance effort for fiscal year 22-23. Let's see. So as we can see, each jurisdiction was able to meet their maintenance of effort target during the prior fiscal year. This was Resolutions were reviewed by ITALC at the March 6th meeting, and they were recommended to be reviewed for approval by this board. Next slide. That concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the board? Not seeing any. Do we have any public comment? And no public comment. We have a recommended action that's down here. And that is the Napa Valley Transportation Authority Tax Agency Board review and approve the jurisdiction's maintenance of effort certification for fiscal year 2022-23. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Shuto. Do we have a second?
Second Garcia.
Second by Garcia. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any nays? That passed unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Not $1 to waste. Okay.
We just follow the instructions to the T, that's all.
That's you. Yes, you do. To a T. Moving on to 11.3. This is the annual financial statement with independent auditors report for the fiscal years ending June 30, 2023 and 22. Antonio Honorado is going to take us through this. There was a recommended action to accept and file this. So Antonio.
Yeah. Can you go to the next slide, please, Laura? So for this item 11.3, staff is asking that the NVTA-TA board accept and file the annual financial statements with independent auditors report for the years ending June 30th, 23 and 22, and the management letter to the board of directors from the auditors. So in the 5th year of Measure T, we're seeing a continual increase, albeit a little bit slower, in the sales tax revenue, signaling a continued recovery from the pandemic. Despite some of the lingering challenges that we have faced recently, the fiscal year 22-23 revenues have exceeded staff's expectations as well as budgetary expectations. You've probably been given reports from Visit Napa Valley or your own economic advisors that some of the sectors of the economy, particularly tourism, are still a little bit slow to recover and rebound. But despite these issues, the modest increase in revenues reflect the resilience and adaptability within the economic landscape. However, some business sectors are still lagging a little bit behind pre-pandemic economic levels, but are expected to rebound in the current and the next fiscal year. One area that continues to struggle is in tourism, as you probably have seen, which Napa County relies heavily on, and where up to 50% of Measure T revenues are generated. While travel and tourism have shown some signs of recovery, the business travel is still not expected to surpass pre-pandemic levels until 2025, contrasting with the potential rebound in leisure travel this year. Once the fiscal year revenues were finalized, total Measure T gains were about 3% higher than the previous year. And if you recall, the previous year, there was a 21% spike in revenues over the post-pandemic year. So we can repeat that, unfortunately, but it's still a positive trend. With the current year now behind us, Measure T growth, including the first 6 months of the current year, and I'm talking about this year, is running about 6% on average over the 5.5 years that Measure T has been in existence. So in the next 6 to 12 months, next slide, please. So this is a history of Measure T revenues on a jurisdictional basis, and you can see the growth rate of the Measure T from the first year of operations, fiscal year 18-19, the first year of operations, and then what we have in the most current audited fiscal year. And as I said, we have a 3% growth over the previous year and 21% prior to that. Except for the pandemic year, obviously Measure T revenues have been increasing year over year, except for the 1 year that we will not mention anymore. So, of course, staff is monitoring the ongoing pressure points such as inflation in the local economies and macro economies, and will make adjustments to our current forecasts and future forecasts and budgets as needed, and will inform the technical advisory committee if we need to adjust the budgets. The audited financial statements are pretty straightforward. You can read a little bit more detailed if you're, an accounting nerd. You can see what's in the notes and what the management discussion analysis conveys to the public. But in respects to the audit, there were no recommendations or findings, so it was a very clean audit for the 5th year in a row. I'm very proud of that for this program. So that concludes my report, and I can answer any questions you may have.
Well, first of all, congratulations on the great and clean audit. And for this report, thank you very much. Do we have any members have any comments or questions?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
I noticed that the numbers on the budget were exactly the same for Yountville and Calistoga across the board, and that's based on the 2.7%. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
For the formula for Yountville and Calistoga, they're exactly the same, 2.7%.
Okay.
Mhm.
That explains it. Okay.
Thank you for that question. Not seeing any others. Do we have any public comment on this? Okay, very good. Without that, then all we need is someone to make a motion to accept and so we can file this recommendation.
I'll make that motion, Joseph.
Okay, we have a motion by Joseph, second by Doring. Do you want to make a second? I called you out because I saw that I missed your light the time before, and I thought, oh, why? Because you're being a gentleman.
I'm becoming dependent upon the folks from American Canyon, so I'm sorry.
No, I just give you an opportunity. It's hard to beat them. Okay, so we have a motion by Joseph and a second by Doring. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any nays? Nope. Okay, that's passed as unanimous. Very good. And thank you very much. Item number 12, this is future agenda items. Do we have any future agenda items for the NVTA-TA? Not seeing any. Then I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 1:56 with the next regular meeting scheduled for Wednesday, April 17th. And we'll move to our next agenda packet. And calling this meeting to order on this March 20th, and this is the NVTA Board of Directors meeting at 1:56. We've already had roll call, though we do have, I do want to add that Director Pedrosa is here in addition to the previous roll call. And, McKee can?
And we have our PCC representative
Oh,
here.
of course. Yes, and our PCC. Thank you.
We do have a quorum.
Okay, we have a quorum. Do we have, it looks like we don't have any remote participation, so we can skip over that. Correct. Very good. Do we have number 4 is the adoption of the agenda. Do we have any changes for the agenda? And if not, do we have a motion and a second? We have a motion by Sedgley.
Second.
Second by Doring. Good job. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any nays? That passes unanimously. Item number 5 is public comment. Do we have any public comment? Not in chambers. And nothing online. Very good. Moving on to number 6, which is chairpersons, board members, MTC and ABEG updates. I don't have an update. Any board members before we go to MTC? Yes.
ABEG's taking up the housing bond issue on Thursday, that's tomorrow. It'll
Okay.
be, I would expect a very long discussion, hopefully very productive, because I think we all know that one's hanging by a thread.
Mhm.
Well, Proposition 1 is, it's about 50.1% in favor.
You're talking about Prop 1 is
Prop
51.
1, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And there's about 20,000 some odd votes that have to be recounted. So there's efforts on both sides to make that their outcome. Those in favor, those opposed.
Yeah, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you for that. Not seeing any others. Do we have an MTC update?
I do, Chair.
Thank you.
Bless you. And I'll just say on the housing, we really need to make sure we're leaning into it. It's something that we worked on with MTCA bag of really creating dollars for preservation, protection. And we know that we're in a housing crisis. And while this is a regional solution, it does bring back local dollars to our community. And we also know that the housing crisis is not defined by a county or a city border. So I know there's been a lot of good work from ABAG and MTC on that front. So just validating what the mayor said. On MTC, it's been a busy month. We were up in Sacramento earlier this month doing some ledge visits. Always fun to spend time with our legislators in Sacramento. We spent a lot of time talking about, which is now SB 1031, formerly SB 925. And this is around addressing the fiscal cliff for the transit operators, but also providing MTC a little bit more authority on looking at how do you integrate fares and schedule and coordination of it. That makes some folks uncomfortable, but if you're getting on the Napa bus and you're getting on BART and then you're getting on another, transit service, there should be some coordination on schedule, you would hope. Sometimes we think it's common sense, but it's not. That's making some folks a little uncomfortable, but I think, again, I think it's the right thing to do. Senator Wiener has been a great friend to transportation, and Senator Cortese, former commissioner, Senator Dodd have also really been leaning into MTC. So again, the goal there is to have enabling legislation with the hope of putting something on the ballot in 2026. Senator Wiener did request, a floor of $750 million to go to the transit operators, but also the transformation action plan, which includes the schedule coordination, the wayfinding and mapping initiatives that we all want to take on. Again, we held the reception, very well received from all our legislators in terms of what the work that MTC is doing. We're also holding a workshop on April 24th and 25th. This is a workshop that we normally have once a year. And I believe we're going to go down to the wonderful county of Santa Clara. On the Planning Commission, both Director Miller and myself, we typically get together with the North Bay Commissioners, and we did get together this week or this month, and we talked about priority conservation areas and potentially looking at how does Napa get a specific designation around some of those dollars. It's going to be competitive, it's going to be tough, but we're always up to the challenge of trying to set some money aside for our region. On the Regional Network Management Committee, which met March 8th, anyone that tuned in might have seen that the Napa Valley Forward programs, projects that we've been working on were advanced. Two alternatives, a signal and a no-build alternative at Rutherford, and at Oakville Crossroad, a compact roundabout, a signal and a no-build. Those were the alternatives that were being considered. As someone that drives on roundabouts, I think they're great. I think they work. And I think what the city of Napa did, I'm not sure if I was on the council at that time, Mayor, but they sure seem to be working. And I do know that they reduce accident rates as well. On the program and allocation, we spent some time talking about OBAG 2. That might, I think if approved, the final number for American Canyon, which was part of the program, is going to be $1.33 million for American Canyon on the HIP program, which is a housing incentive pool. And part of what we do as commissioners, and those that follow me will learn, it's not just accepting the money, it's being on the front side for creating the criteria that makes our regions more competitive. And you get outcomes like this. And lastly, on the regional measure 3 operating program fund, if it's approved by the commission later this month, it will result in an increase for the Vine Transit route from $670,000 to $1.48 million, the highest single percentage increase of existing recipients. So again, a lot of good work happening at the region. We've been spending a lot of time at MTC and even going up to San Francisco on a Friday afternoon, which is not where I would want to spend a Friday afternoon. But, Senator Wiener, I just do want to give him a shout out. He has been a tremendous ally for transportation and is really sticking his neck out there for the right reason. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And so have you. You dedicate a lot of time. Thank you.
I can tell you all the ins and outs of BART now. So
No, thank you very much for that report. Are there any questions on that lengthy report? No? Okay. And then was that your ABAG report, or did you want to provide that? Was it your ABAG report? Perfect. Okay. So then moving on to item 7, which is our executive director's update.
Thank you, Chair Alessio. Let's see. On February 21st and 22nd, I attended a 2-day meeting of the California Transit Association's Executive Committee, where I was reappointed as the chair of the Small Operators Committee. On February 29th, I attended the second Transit Transformation task force meeting where the Undersecretary Mark Tollefson solicited comments on how transit can help meet the state's climate goals. The Transit Transformation Task Force staff have solicited additional information about transit challenges and innovations in preparation for the April 15th meeting in San Diego, which I plan to attend. On March 1st, NVTA staff, along with Chair Alessio, participated in the Leadership Napa Valley Government Day. Director of Capital Development Planning, Danielle Schmitz, Director of Administration and Finance, Tony Honorato, and Outreach Communication Specialist and I attended the MTC's legislative event in Sacramento on March 11th. During our visit, we participated in meetings at Senator Dodd and Assembly Leader Agua Curry's offices. On project updates, there are going to be additional lane closures at Sosco Junction, originally planned for March 16th, which I informed the board last month, have now been moved to April 5th at 5 a.m. Oh, that's the closures. Sorry, April 3rd, beginning at 9 p.m. to Monday, April 5th at 5 a.m. In addition, closures are planned on southbound State Route 221 lasting between 8 and 10 days. There will be changeable message signs detouring drivers to SR 121 to access State Route 29 and also using Corporate Way to get to Devlin. We will continue to update you on those dates. We had looked at other options for that, but they were just too pricey and would include a full closure, 55-hour closure, weekend closure. So we're moving forward with the weekday closures. And again, we will keep you posted on that. Standard & Poor reaffirmed NVTA's A- investment grade credit rating. The A- issuer credit rating reflects S&P's opinion of NVTA's robust economic base and prudent fiscal management, quote unquote, as well as our diverse mix of revenue that is for the most part not sensitive to mass transit activity. The report confirmed that agency's financial outlook is very stable. So congrats to Tony and his team for your prudent fiscal management. News and staff acknowledgement. Last but not least, we have some big news. We moved into the new vine maintenance facility over the weekend. I want to thank all the staff for the work we did to get the facility ready. It was a 10-year effort and not something any of us could have done alone. But I specifically wanted to thank Rebecca and Grant and acknowledge the last minute efforts and crazy logistics to bring effort to to bring this project to fruition and the move to happen. So that included, and I'm going to read this list because it's so ridiculous, and watching Rebecca and Grant running around like chickens last week, and actually most of us doing the same thing, but we had to contract with the moving contractor, and we had to do that twice because the first contractor didn't meet the requirements. We had to obtain temporary certificate of temporary occupancy by ensuring all life safety systems are in place, operational, and approved by the county fire planning and building. We had to coordinate final permit alteration approvals for the hydrogen retrofit and equipment anchorage. We had to coordinate and contract outside services to install radio antenna equipment for Vine and VineGo communications. We had to coordinate final internet connectivity for general network access as well as access to the county network. We had to coordinate temporary lighting of the parking area until the solar canopies are built. We had to coordinate commissioning of bus electric vehicle charging stations, including repair of a damaged charging station. We had to coordinate renewed waste and recycling services, contract and start composting, ensure personnel card and key access to the facility, decommissioning and arranging cleaning of the old facility, and last minute payments to various utilities to let us move in. So it was a crazy week, but we did it. And we're looking forward to sharing with you the April 12th ribbon cutting event, which is at 10 a.m. and you should have already received your invitations. And I don't know, do we distribute them in the packet too today? If not, we'll make sure. Yeah. So I don't think we're going to meet again before that date. So again, mark your calendars, April 12th at 10 a.m. and we will be serving brunch thanks to Alton Construction. That concludes my report.
That's a great report. Congratulations to your staff. I can see, everybody out there working very hard. And Kate, this is something that you brought to realization along with Daniel Schmidt and your staff, because in the early days when I first joined this board, nobody was excited about spending any money on a maintenance facility. But Kate kept bringing it back, and bringing creative ways of being able to financially make this happen. And it's here. So congratulations to you. Laura, if we could, if not already, can you send a calendar invite to all the directors? Just so it's also on their calendar through their Outlook? That'd be great. Are there any questions or comments for the executive director? Not seeing any. Okay, thank you. We're on to number 8, which is a Caltrans update. Is Amani with us today?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. And
Hello.
good afternoon, Board of Directors members. So this is Amani, the regional PM from Napa. So instead of going into the list of projects that we have in Caltrans, which is currently 34 active projects, I just would like to take the opportunity to present one of the projects which is in the design phase. This is the Turkey Creek Bridge replacement that will be presented by the project manager, Dalian Chang. This project has been gone with discussion with the city of Napa regarding the masonry stones. Then the project is cost estimate is 15.6 million as a construction capital. And I'll give it to Daniel to present. Thank you.
Good afternoon to the members of the board. I'm Daniel Chang. I'm going to be presenting this presentation for the Turkey Bridge replacement. Next slide, please. So this bridge project site location is north of Imola on State Route 121. It's the limits are post mile 6.4 and 6.5 in the city of Napa. Next slide, please. A little history lesson about this bridge. This bridge was originally built in 1918. In 1944, it was widened on the left side. And then, as you see on the right side of the pictures, we have some exposed rebars and concrete cracking at the deck area. So in 1997, the bridge, there was a project to replace this bridge. However, due to utility conflicts, the project was unparred in 2012. However, because there are these deficiencies in 2017, another project came in and temporarily repaired these deficiencies until a replacement project can be programmed. Next slide, please. And so in 2018, 4JA20 is the EA where this is the new bridge that was programmed in. Currently, we met the 65% target, and so we're now shooting for 95% PS&E design. Hopefully, we get something by the end of the month. This project will be done in 3 stages. First, we'll widen on the west side, and then traffic will be on the existing bridge. And then stage 2, we'll flip it and have widening on the east side of the bridge, and therefore traffic will be on the west side. And then lastly, stage 3 is where we reset for the final alignment along with the creek work. This project is proposed to keep both lanes open in each direction, so during construction, so there wouldn't be any major impact to the traffic. There are risks to this project that could delay the current schedule. We were supposed to deliver this year, but it seems more likely because of right-of-way needs and utility relocation plans that it might delay the delivery of this project for this fiscal year. Caltrans usually anticipate a bridge to last 75 years, plus or minus. So right now, this bridge is on extended time. Next slide, please. And so a little history about this bridge. Currently, it is not listed in the National Register of Historic Places. This is determined by the 1986 Caltrans Bridge Inventory and the 2003 Masonry Bridge Survey Inventory. This is listed as Category 5 in the Caltrans database for historic bridges, but it is still listed ineligible and remains the same as today. Next slide, please. So a little history about MASH. MASH acronym is actually a manual for assessing safety hardwares. So basically in 1962, the National Cooperative Highway Research Project started this acronym MASH. In 1993, they decided to have uniformity in how they test the crash for each safety device and all the regulations. And therefore, by 2009, the feds had actually incorporate the MASH standard, and thus they created MASH 2009. By 2016, another version of MASH came out. This is the second revision. And basically, what also happened concurrently is that they decided to give the sunsetting of the old guidelines, the NCHRP guidelines. And so by the end of December 2019, all new project has to follow the latest MASH standard, which currently is at MASH 2016. For this project, I don't think there has not been any updates in the MASH guide standards. So the masonry stones are an issue for this project. Next slide, please. And so we see on the picture over here, this is actually a picture of Sulphur Creek. And this is, I think this was back in 2016 where a vehicle ran into the barrier. And as we can see, the masonry blocks did not hold up. Currently, masonry blocks are not MASH compliant. And so if a vehicle hits a barrier, it's supposed to slide along. But as we see in the picture on the right, it kind of disintegrated. So two issues here. One is the vehicle passenger safety. And the other issue is basically now you have flying debris. So it is a risk to pedestrians too. So this project is federally funded. So all new barrier railings and any improvement has to follow FXWA standards. Next slide, please. And so this slide is actually what we're planning to do. This is a visual sim of our project. We are gonna have masonry-like architecture on the bridge. The existing masonry stone walls will be salvaged and will be stored at a City of Napa designated maintenance yard, hopefully. We are planning to put 10 feet sidewalks, 8 feet shoulders, and 12-foot lanes in each direction with the median of 13 feet, 11 inches. So this right here on the above is what we would expect the overall product to be. And next slide, please. And that concludes my presentation. I'm open to questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I enjoy the walk down history lane as we look at the Tuolumne Bridge. Do you happen to know who the original mason was who built the bridge in 1918?
I'm not so sure. I couldn't find it in our documents, but I think there's a plaque on the east side of the bridge. They might be there. So in part of salvaging those masonry walls, we'll also save that plaque too.
Thank you. Member Gregory, Director Gregory.
Thank you, Daniel. Will you be raising the vertical profile of the bridge? And if so, what's the plan at the Hawthorne property?
So we're still in design. There is a slight profile raise of 2 feet so far. That Hawthorne, we know there's an issue in stage 2 of the project, and we are trying to mitigate it to hopefully keep it open. And one of the solutions that we had that we're still in the talks of is maybe get a TC area between the two properties to create another entrance through the shopping plaza for them. We know that there's an entrance to enter the shopping plaza at Kansas Avenue. So hopefully that would resolve the stage 2 portion, but we don't expect it to be, if we have to close off the existing entrance, we don't expect it to be more than 3 to 5 months.
Thank you. Director Sashley?
Thank you. You know, I've had interest in the native stones on the railings now, and we may have missed that opportunity. Maybe our own public works missed that opportunity to incorporate that historical feature into the pedestrian approaches, not on the bridge itself, but the pedestrian approaches to that. Maybe it's still a possibility. There's no mention of the native stones or the plaque being salvaged. I know that there was some discussion that the city would accept them and store them, but there's no mention in any of the materials. So is that a verbal, or is that a handshake, or do we, as Caltrans, understand that that's the interest, is to salvage those native stones?
I think when this issue came up, I think end of August, we discussed it internally, and we are going to salvage that, the stones, and now the plaque too. So we'll put it in our 95% plans to list it for the contractor to make sure they salvage them and store them at a designated address that by City of Napa.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm looking to see if there's any other questions. I don't see any. Do we have any public comment on this? And no public comment. Very good. Well, this was informational and it was very interesting information. We appreciate your time and your report.
Before he goes,
Yes.
I have a question for Daniel.
Sure.
You still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, I'm interested in getting on your long list of activities just to recheck all the metered lights along 29, primarily from, I think it's like Salvador to almost close to the Trancas overpass. I know we probably did this like 10 years ago, but they seem incredibly out of sync right now. I don't know if it's a little battery that needs to go in there, but you know, there's a lot of traffic backing up, and it's all about the emissions. So I know it's not a big priority, but as long as I can get it on a list someplace, I'd be happy.
I think we are discussing this in our coordination meeting between that we have monthly. Correct me if I'm wrong, Amani. I think our signal ops should be looking at that issue.
So I think-
Director Moeller, we meet monthly with Caltrans and we can add any concerns that you have to that list. So why don't we chat after this meeting and we can talk about it in a little bit more detail and then make sure that we're getting the answers that you need.
Yeah, it's just making sure that, you know, those lights are timed appropriately.
Okay,
That's it.
yep, all right.
And I think that's pretty much it's the
Yeah, I mean-
same segment everybody gets backed up on. So if I've got that wrong, but it's pretty much Salvador to when go through a few lights and then all of a sudden we break out to the
Okay.
overpass.
All
It
right,
seems
great.
way backed up. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Director Mueller. Director Pedrosa?
Thank you, Chair. While we're adding to the list of concerns, I've heard from some residents about the bridge work that we're doing as you approach Yountville, how we're closing the road sooner. And apparently, from what I'm hear, is that it's improving congestion because it's metering the traffic a little bit better. I don't know whether that's true or not. I have not seen traffic at 7 a.m. because I don't go up Valley at 7 a.m. But I've heard comments from multiple folks. So whether that's a solution by accident, I think it'd be good just to verify whether that's actually improving the congestion at Madison Light because it's metering the flow much sooner because it's closing it to a one lane as you're crossing that bridge.
So we've talked to Caltrans about that and they're going to do an after study so that we have an idea, a comparison of average times, wait times.
I support that. I just want to make sure that
It's
Yeah.
on our list.
but the
Yeah.
study should happen right now while the lane's closed to understand the current condition, correct?
Right.
Perfect. All right, thank you.
Very good. A silver lining. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. I think
one
that's
more.
it. Oh, Director
one more.
Sedgley. Oh, we have another one. See, we started on a roll here, but let's remember we have time. We want to stay on time.
Yeah, Mayor Mueller.
We don't
And
want
I
to.
believe I saw it on an earlier list of where it was in design or environmental. Byway East, temporary K-rail over the Salvador Channel. I get lots of calls on that. It was
Yep.
damaged 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And I know that there's issues. So is that still on the list? I didn't quite see it on this project list. Byway East, City of Napa, it's a bridge. Is that still in the queue somewhere?
It is.
This bridge actually has been removed from the three bridges to improve the railing. And currently we have a meeting with the city of Napa actually at 4 p.m. to discuss this project. So we'll keep you posted about the updates for the Byway East project. Thank you.
They have a meeting today at 4 p.m. with City of Napa.
Yes, yes.
Oh, we do. Oh, because
So
the
now you
audio is
can
not
call-
so great. So
you can call
on
your
that
staff.
project.
On that project.
Perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. That's a great answer. We like that. Okay. Director Sedgley smiling. All right. I think we're gonna end on that and we're gonna move on. Thank you very much for your information and update.
Thank you.
Item number 7 is a public hearing, and this is informational only. So as a public hearing, we do need to open this, and the time is 2:25. Do we have a motion to open? Stay consistent. Open by Shinto, second by McKee Cant. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any nays? Nope. Okay, we're officially open.
Go to the next slide. Yeah. All right. Good afternoon again. Antonio Honorado, Director of Finance for NVTA. So for this public hearing, staff is asking the board to review and comment on the fiscal year 24-25 NVTA annual operating budget of $35,307,000, a capital budget of $16,200,000, and transportation for clean air budget of $500,000 for a total amount of $52,007 for the first year. And then review and comment on the fiscal year 25-26, the second year's annual operating budget of $28,437,300, a capital budget of $0, and I'll explain that in a minute, and transportation for clean air budget of $500,000 for a total amount of $28,937,300 for a total 2-year budget of $80,944,300. NVTA will receive comments and requests for revisions for consideration over the next 30 days for possible incorporation into the final budget amounts for approval and adoption. Budgetary adjustments will be brought back to the board for any new projects, programs, requests for new appropriation or amendments to carry over unused budgets from the previous year to the second year in the future. So for this slide, for the newer board members, we just want to talk a little bit about our budget cycle. NVTA has a biennial budget process, which means staff presents to the board the agency's 2-year plan for operations. We start with the development of the budget plan back in January, and we'll continue to refine it up until the final adoption date expected in April. The Vine-Go budget was reviewed and endorsed by the Paratransit Coordinating Council earlier this month. We have a first reading today, then adoption of the 2-year budget will be on the docket for the April board meeting. Next slide, please. So the budget outlines NVTA's plan for how resources will be used and will achieve our agency's goals and objectives over the next 2 fiscal years. The proposed consolidated budget is $52 million for fiscal year 24-25, the first year of the budget, and $28.9 million in the second year of budget for, as I mentioned, a total 2-year budget of $80,944,300. In the upper table, you'll see how we break, NVTA has multiple budgets, multiple funds, and you'll see how each of those budgets are listed in the 2 years of the proposed budget cycle. So the CMA budget is also known as the planning budget, is also known as the general fund. That's where all agencies' salaries and special projects reside, other than public transit. We do have a public transit budget. We'll go into the 2 primary budgets momentarily here. We do have a debt service budget. We borrowed some money from the federal government to build the new bus maintenance facility. And so we have some debt service over the next 2 years, actually over the next 35 years. But over the next 2 years, it's pretty minimal with only interest that we have to pay for the bus maintenance facility, and those are the budgets for the debt service. We have a capital budget, as I mentioned, 16.2 million over the 2 years. The first year, we allocate the entire 16.2 million. The transportation for clean air, it's a passive budget. We're a pass-through agency, but that budget is 500,000 and the board still has to approve that budget even though it's passive. I do include depreciation as a separate line item because it's rather large, but it's considered an operating expense. But there is no vendor, it's not a direct cost. It's just on the agency's books. It's an accounting process, but it is still part of the budget for a total amount of 80,944,000. On the bottom table, just gives you a little bit of perspective of what this board approved in the previous budget cycle versus the current proposed budget cycle. And as you notice, the last budget cycle, we had it was a $113 million budget as opposed to $80 million. And that's primarily because of two reasons. One, $40 million for the bus maintenance facility, which was just completed a few days ago. And two, the Vine Trail, allocated over the last 2 years, $16 million for the Vine Trail. That's substantially complete. Hopefully it'll open a little later on this year, but that for those costs are going to be minimal for the next few months and really doesn't have a meaningful impact over the next 2 years. We'll talk about the Vine Trail momentarily in another slide. So next slide, please. So just getting down to the finer details, and this is a snapshot. It is rather detailed, but it shows on a consolidated basis where our revenues are coming from and where the expenditures goes towards. You can see we have a menu of items for where the revenues are generated, primarily Transportation Development Act, the course and sales tax for transportation, retail sales tax for transportation purposes. We get federal funds, we get state funds, we get funds from Caltrans, we get investment earnings, we have miscellaneous one-time funding sources. It's a menu of revenue funding sources that we have to assemble for specific plans and programs. And every program or every expenditures have some sort of strings attached on what's an eligible cost. And down below, you'll see where the expenditures are going towards. We pay for agency salaries and benefits, agency administration, purchase transportation. That's our third-party contract to provide public transit services. We have maintenance costs, insurance, of course, fueling costs. We do have some interest expense allocated for not only for debt service, but also for if we have to draw upon a line of credit that we have with the local bank. As I said, I kind of have depreciation expense as a separate line item just to show you what the impact is on that expense. And then we have what's called salary chargebacks. So all agency staff members are in the general fund, but we do charge out staff time to the transit fund, so they get their fair share of what the cost is for our staff members to provide those services. Next slide, please. So just going down, and this is in your packet. You do have a handout, which is a little bit bigger. Apologies for the small font, but it is a very detailed, get into the weeds type of budget.
Yes, we appreciate the handouts.
And the handout just provides a little bit of a snapshot, but this tells you about the capital budget as well as, and then on a consolidated basis, how the $80 million, how they land between the different budget services. As I mentioned, the entire capital budget is allocated in the first year, $16.2 million. Now that's intentional. We tend to front load the budgets in the first year over the 2-year plan, and an unused portion, we'll ask this board to transfer the unused portion to the second year. And the reason we do that is because our agency is very heavily based on the programs and the projects that we deliver. Those projects and programs sometimes the scheduling can be a moving target. So this gives us the optimization and flexibility to shift things around if we need to. If we had to delay some projects to the second year, we have that ability. If we had to accelerate some projects to the first year, we have that ability as well. So we don't have to come to the board every single time and ask for a one-time adjustment. So it gives us maximum flexibility on the spending authority for the agency. And when resources are available, we'll go ahead and start a new project or a new program as well. Next slide, please.
And I just wanted to clarify that we still come to you every time we spend money that in contracts and so on and so forth. So this is just so that we don't have to do another budget adjustment.
Yeah, and I know this has been a standard kind of best practice for this organization. Thank you.
So just putting the numbers into kind of a pie chart of where the revenues are coming from on a consolidated basis. Now, the devil's in the details, and we'll talk a little bit more about the general fund and the public transit fund. But on a consolidated, very high level detail, this is where our revenues come from. It's kind of balanced at this point, where about a third comes from the feds, about a third comes from Transportation Development Act funds, state alert and regional revenues, about a third there. And then the rest comes from 4% comes from fare box or other funding, special one-time funding sources. And on the expense side, we'll see a large portion of expenditures are for the public transit services. And as I said, when we get into the transit budget, we'll see a little bit more clearly what that composes of. The capital budget is about 20%. Personnel comprises about 6% of the total budget. We have some admin and pass-through budgets, expenses about 3%, and consulting services, our special projects, are about 16%, and then we round up the rest with depreciation and agency operations. Next slide, please. Okay, this is where we get into a little bit of the nitty-gritty. The CMA, Congestion Management Authority. Basically, this is where all our non-public transit programs and resources are allocated. Up above, you'll see a snapshot of where the revenues come from. As I said, mainly TDA, state, local funding sources. On the federal side, it's Federal Highway Administration, and we get one-time special grants and projects. On the expense side, most of the expenses goes towards consulting services. We'll see a little bit more on the pie chart, salaries and benefits, 3 broad categories: salaries and benefits, consulting services, and office administration. Next slide, please. So this gives you a pie chart, a little bit more of where the revenues come from and where the expenses go towards. I just talked about the revenues a little bit in the last slide. Expenses, 60% of the budgeted costs for the general fund goes towards the consulting services, budgetary costs. And as Executive Director Miller mentioned, we come back to the board with secured funding and actually contracts to perform those services. But on a budgetary basis, 60% of the general fund is composed of those special projects. About 9% of the budget is for administrative oversight, administrative operations, and about a third of the budget is for personnel costs. Next slide, please. You have a more detailed list, but these are the top 5 projects that we intend on carrying out over the next 2 years. The biggest will be State Route 29, American Canyon Corridor improvements in this, in the South Valley, in the south part of the county. We have SR 2912 Airport, the environmental documentation. Sosco Junction completion activities allocated about $1 million, and Vine Trail completion activities about $1 million. Now, this is an allocation. Doesn't mean we're going to spend it. It just means we're budgeting for future costs. And then if we do have contracts, we're ready to go ahead and perform some of those services. We will come back to the board with contracts asking for approval. And all other special projects combined is about $3.4 million. As I mentioned, you have a more detail in the packet. There's a more detailed listing of all those special projects we would like to carry out over the next 2 years.
And these numbers are in thousands.
And these numbers are in thousands. Thank you. Next slide, please. So we're going to switch over to public transit and debt service budget overview. Pretty much straightforward where we get our revenues and where we get our expenses. And the bottom table is just, just 6 or 7 broad categories of how we carry out public transit services and what those costs are expected to be. And as you can tell, since 2021, unfortunately, costs have been going up. And we do our best to ensure that we are able to carry out all the services that the public expects from us within the means of where our revenues are being generated, and trying to live within those means. Next slide, please. This is more of a visual of a pie chart of where the funding is coming from and what the funding is going towards. The revenue generations for the next year is actually a little bit more balanced. In the past, Transportation Development Act revenues have been about 45 to 50% of funding operations. Because of the bipartisan infrastructure law, we've received a bump in Federal Transit Administration funds, about 20 to 30%. So now the feds provide about, close to a third of our operations funding. TDA provides about a third. State and local resources provide about a third. Farebox is still struggling. On a combined basis, we budget about 5% here. Depending on the transit service, that can be anywhere from, as Rebecca Schenk, our transit manager, mentioned in the last report last month, Vine Transit, our fixed route transit services, is about 11% in the last year. The Up Valleys, they're about 10%. American Canyon Transit is about 15% farebox recovery. So, but on a blended basis, it represents only about 5% of our operating revenues that we receive for public transit. On the expense side, the majority of the cost is for public transit and fuel, of course. Those are two direct drivers of the cost for transit. And the more transit we provide, the higher the cost is. And unfortunately, costs are going up faster than our farebox generations. We'll talk about that in another memo in a little bit here. The rest is going towards maintenance of the vehicles and facilities, the upkeep of maintaining our facilities, as well as our aging fleet of diesel vehicles. That being said, that costs have been increasing year over year because our diesel and unleaded fuel fleets are aging. And we can't replace them fast enough. We have 7 electric vehicles. The cost of maintaining those are much less, but 7 out of 65 vehicles, you still have 50 some odd vehicles with that requires costly upgrades in some cases. Depreciation represents 17% of our operating costs. If you take that out, purchase transportation and fuel it's more like close to 90% of our costs for providing those transit services. And of course, we have some overhead costs and debt service costs, which rounds out our expenses for public transit. Next slide, please. Just a snapshot of our capital investments. So for the next 2 years, we intend on purchasing. We actually just executed an order to receive 8 new battery electric buses that will be delivered in late 2025. We do have some buses for Calistoga that are going to be delivered in the next few months here. Other vehicles, sometimes we get a solicitation for getting some used buses, and we usually jump on those if we can. We still have a need for additional buses. You can see in the photo below what the Gilligs look like when they are delivered. I doubt they're going to be red, white, and blue. Most likely going to be our colors, but it gives you a little bit of an idea of what the Gillig buses that will be delivered in the next 2 years will look like. In terms of facilities, we intend on making some upgrades to the Redwood Park and Ride. Also, the Napa Valley College is on schedule to receive some upgrades and enhancements there, and some maintenance for the Saukville Gateway Transit Center and some upgrades to the Saukville Gateway Transit Center. And we also intend on purchasing some transit-related equipment. So that's our capital investment strategy over the next 2 years. All right, next slide, please. And that concludes my report, actually. In the interest of time, you can go ahead and peruse the agenda. And if you have any questions, go ahead and ask,
Thank you.
staff.
Do we have any questions? Yes, Director Mickey Cant.
Thank you. Antonio, I have a question for slide 10 and watching the transit, the fare box for the forecast for 24. I know you're bringing it down a little bit if we do in fact vote to increase fares. And then there's a big bump up for 24, 25. And I was just wondering if you could highlight what that's based on.
Can you? That does assume that the board will increase the fares for the Vine. I think we have an item on that. The Vine represents 90% of the fare box generations for all of our transit services. So the assumption is that that we will receive higher fare box generations over the next 2 years.
After the first year, after the
Yep.
increase?
Mhm,
Okay,
mhm.
thank
It'll
you.
be slow, but it'll be an upward trend,
It'll be an upward trend.
hopefully. That's the expectation.
Thank you for the question. Any other questions? Not seeing any. Do we have any public comment on this item? We do not. So this is informational only, but it is a public hearing. So I guess at this point, you've presented, we've reviewed, and we could go ahead and close public hearing, is my understanding, at 2:45. To be consistent, do we have a motion to close public hearing? Moved by Joseph,
Second Garcia.
second by Garcia. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any nays? Member Eisenberg, did you want to?
For the next, I'm just getting ahead of myself.
Okay, very good. Are there any nays? Not seeing any, so all approved. Thank you. Moving on to the consent items, consent agenda, there's 10.1 through 10.5.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent.
I would like to remove 10.4.
Oh,
10.4? Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we're gonna pull 10.4. Are there any other items anybody like to pull? If not, do we have a motion to approve 10.1, 2, 3, and 5?
I'll make that motion, Joseph.
Joseph made the took a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? No nays, that passed unanimously. 10.4, the Vine Trail St. Helena to Calsooka construction contract budget increase. And Grant, you're gonna walk us through this?
Yes, good
Thank you.
afternoon, Chair Alessio, Vice Chair Joseph. My name is Grant Bailey. I'm the engineering manager with the Napa Valley Transportation Authority. Item 10.4 is requesting the board authorize an additional $740,000 in construction funding that will be used for construction expenses, primarily for construction costs as opposed to construction oversight. The item also requests that the board authorize the executive director designee to issue change orders in an amount not to exceed $2,056,709. That just increases the executive director's authority there from the previous amount accordingly with the $740,000 request here. This additional request comes as a result of continued delays with this project related to PG&E construction conflicts, not only with their replacement line in the southern portion of the project, but also with conflicts in the northern portion of the project as well. By and large, the northern portion, the northern conflicts have been resolved. However, we were only able to get into the southern portion of the project and begin construction work in August of last year. And with rain beginning around mid-November, the construction season was cut short following that, following the beginning of the rain. Additionally, this request accounts for a forecasted approximately $400,000 overhead claim that we expect the contractor will be submitting, as well as we'll also address some drainage issues that we've discovered following the rains this year, and additional costs for archaeological oversight. They are minor, but it seems like anytime we move dirt on this project, we uncover new artifacts. That is generally the overview. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. I'm kind of shocked how you're not showing any gray hair yet with this project. I know it's been a very complicated, interesting project. Director Eisenberg, your question.
Yes, well, my concern is quite a few months ago, we approved an additional amount for that section of the Vine Trail. And it was presented as all we need is this and we'll be able to go forward. And then this is a completely new request. And I'm just wondering how it was so misjudged or why this huge additional request. And it's a significant hit on the Calistoga city budget for our portion.
I agree. And yeah, 700 and almost $50,000 is not insignificant. I will note that in the presentation to the jurisdictions, we did, I did explain that there may be additional costs incurred, and that the request made last summer may not be the final request. Now, why we are here making an additional request today, again, it has to do with the construction oversight costs. I think they were greater than we had anticipated. Our construction management and inspection company requested an additional about $300,000, which ate up about half of that request. And that was for the extended time period we've been we spent in construction. There, as mentioned, there are also archaeological discoveries. Virtually any time we move new soil on the project, we discover new artifacts. And we're actually working with Caltrans right now to combine multiple areas that were thought to be independent, but now appear to be connected as far as environmentally sensitive.
You know, this project probably excites me more than any other NVTA project. I'm just absolutely looking forward to it. But my question is, are there any assurances that we won't get another unexpected increase? And are there any other sources of revenue other than from the jurisdictions that could cover some of this cost?
Yes, so I can't guarantee this will be the last request. There is still a significant portion of the trail that needs to be rough graded and paved between approximately Deer Park Road and Ehlers Avenue or Road, I think. And it's possible we could encounter subsurface phenomenon that could result in additional costs. At this time, to answer the second part of your question, we have not identified other funding sources that will reimburse the jurisdictions. However, we continue to seek a claim reimbursement with PG&E for costs incurred to the order of approximately $1.4 million this time.
Has there been a formal request to PG&E to cover these costs?
There has been a formal request. However, they can't analyze it until we've completed or we've submitted the full and final claim package, and we likely won't be able to do that until close to project completion. We're estimating June of this year.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yes.
And if I can follow up on that, assuming PG&E agrees or we persuade them to accept the 1.4 million, is that going to be allocated back to the jurisdictions and to the Vine Trail Coalition and so forth?
Yes, it will be. Based on the contributions the jurisdictions have agreed to provide, that's how it will be reallocated.
Okay, so if there's any consolation, you might get something back, assuming we can make PG&E pony up for the delays.
That would be very nice if that does happen. What's Grant on that? What's the overall percentage overrun of the original budget? Knowing this, there would be, contingency, but do we know what the percentage is?
Yes, so the base bid contract was about, I think it's $12.7 million. We are over, the additional or total contingency request, if approved today, would be just over 2 million. That puts us at about 16% of the base bid, which is, I admit some may not believe it, but actually within the realm of what's to be expected on a challenging and complicated project such as this.
Grant wasn't here when we awarded, but you'll recall that we had over a $2 million shortfall in the original contract, and we did a lot of jerry rigging with the county to help us out, which we will pay them back with highway funds for their project coming up, connecting St. Helena to Yountville. And we had to under budget the contingency significantly in order to move forward with the contract. So we did it sort of acknowledging the risk. And also, this is a project that's not just NVTA. It's a project, it's the county of Napa, the city of St. Helena, the city of Calistoga, and the Vine Trail. So we're all working together on this, and we just happen to be the lucky suckers that are overseeing the contract. I would also like to just point out that this project is really complicated and it seems like it shouldn't be. It's like a 10-foot path going through relatively undeveloped. There's so many complexities to it. We have inherited the design team, might not have been our first choice. And we are working with them right now and muddling through. And June is not that far away where we think the project will be mostly done. We are also contracting with one of our existing on-call engineering firms to make sure that we've done everything that we can to submit the claim correctly to PG&E. And we will not be short of pursuing support from our legal team if they don't respond. We have a contract that was very specific on timelines, and they have not met any of those timelines. And not only has it delayed the project, but it has also created additional expenses with potholing because part of the existing gas line was live, so we had to work around that. And then, of course, we've had unusual weather, wet weather this year. So I just think that Grant is doing a great job. His never-ending patience around the trials and tribulation of this project should not go unlauded. So thank you, Grant, for the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Kate, Executive Director, and again, Grant, your work and the question. It's a good question. My hope is it's going to be the most beautiful, cherished section of the Vine Trail when it gets complete. But I see we have a question from Director Doring.
Thank you, Chair. Without getting into a whole lot of detail in the public setting, are there any other anticipated claims other than PG&E?
No, other than we are appear to be getting some pro bono help right now, but no, that was it.
Well, again, thank you very much and for your due diligence by all staff. On that, do we have a motion to approve 10.4?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Joseph and a second by Gregory. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay. Any nays?
No.
We have one nay. Okay. And who's a nay by? Doring? Okay. So one nay and then all ayes, otherwise, so we do have the motion passes. Okay. Moving on to 11.1, and I know we have a couple members. Looks like we're doing pretty good that may have to leave here shortly, but we're moving along pretty good. 11.1 is an action item, and this is proposed Vine Transit fare increase. Rebecca Schenk is going to present this. This is pages 60 through 84.
Thank you, Chair Licio, members of the board. My name is Rebecca Schenk. I'm the transit manager here at NVTA. As you may recall, this is basically a continuation of the first reading and the public hearing that we had at our February 2024 board meeting about fare increases. And so just to give you a little bit of recap on that, we're proposing a fare increase. If you look at page 64 of your board report, it gives you the details. They remain unchanged from our previous meeting. It basically would mean that the adult fare would go up from $1.60 to $2, youth from $1.10 to $1.25, and then the senior disabled from $80 to $1. That basically represents on the adult fare side a 25% increase. We would have a subsequent 25% increase on our VineGo paratransit fares. We break that down into two zones. So if you're doing a single zone ride, say it's $3.20, that might be something like Napa to Yountville, for example, and that would go up to $4. And then if you're doing a multi-zone ride, which might be something like, for example, St. Helena down to Vallejo, it would go up from $4 to $8. We did receive public comment that was presented to you on this at the February board meeting. And then we did have some discussion at the board meeting, and we subsequently met with Director Smith to answer some questions she had about the VineGo fare increase, because we do understand that, right, that is our highest fare, and that does fall on people that oftentimes have a hard time making that fair purchase. We did assure her that the increase in VineGo is the same as the increase in Vine in terms of its overall percentage, and that any VineGo passes that have already been purchased by people or by, say, institutions or the county will still, after, if this went into effect on July 1st, still be effective, and they could still utilize them. So they won't lose any of the value they've invested. And then Director Mueller had brought up kind of the important topic of price sensitivity and what this means, because we know that we're trying to increase ridership. But I think, as our Finance Director, Antonio Honorado, discussed last time, that we do think, well, though we'd have a slight decrease in the number of riders, potentially, we would make up for that in fares. And then I guess also just thinking a little bit more on the topic, what we've seen in a place like American Canyon, for example, where there's a shuttle and a fare, we've had very robust ridership and return to kind of pre-COVID levels. Meanwhile, in a place maybe like Yountville, where we do have a free fare, we haven't quite gotten back to that point. So not saying there's lots of different factors that go into that, but also saying that price is not the only factor, I guess, that contributes sometimes to our ridership. If we can put out a consistent product, a quality product, we think we will be able to move forward. So with that, I'll open it up for any further questions.
Thank you for that report. Do we have any? Yes, Director Doring.
I don't recall where I saw this, but I thought I saw something in one of the staff reports mentioning that fare box recovery includes other items other than the fares. For example, advertising, and talk to us a little bit about advertising and what's the status of pricing for advertising, and how much of that is that a very small amount, or is it a significant amount of money to the overall fare box recovery? Thank you.
Yes, in terms of the fare, so it does include a couple of things. It's like that $1.60 that you put in, for example, or the $1, say, on the shuttle. It also includes things like the contribution that Yountville, St. Helena, American Canyon, and Calistoga make to their shuttle program. So that's also included as fares. Offhand, I'm not sure what percentage of the advertising is part of our fare box. I know that our advertising revenues have gone up kind of year over year, and we have seen some growth there, which has been positive. And I know that our Lamar contract, who currently has our advertising contract, is up for renewal on June 30th. So it'll be a good opportunity to kind of revisit that and try to basically extract as much funding as we can from advertising moving forward.
The other question I have is, yeah, thank you, Antonio.
I can just follow up on that.
Thank you.
So last year, we generated overall about $871,000 in fare box. About 118 came from advertising. So that was about 12%, 13% was a contribution from advertising. That being said, we are going to renew a contract with an advertising company here. We have to do it in the next few months. The concern or issue that I have with relying on advertising fares to kind of make up that gap is, as we get new electric buses, we have a moratorium on advertising on those new buses, because we don't want decals on our new electric buses, and they rip them off and it can cause some damage for new buses. And so our fleet of advertising space on those on our current fleet is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. But to answer your question, about 12% of the fare box comes from advertising.
All right. Thank you for that explanation. Very good information. My other question is whether the staff has considered a delay in implementing the fare increases. In other words, passing it, but just trying to explore the timing. I'm concerned about the timing. There's no question we need to raise the rates, but I don't know if there's been consideration in terms of could you wait 6 months or 8 months? When is the best time? Probably now, but has there been any thought to that in terms of the most ideal time to hit folks with that increase?
Sure. And right, if we pass this today, it would not be immediate. It would go into effect on kind of July 1st, because we do want that opportunity to let people know about the increase, kind of give them fair warning and prepare. We kind of selected that date, not surprising, that as well on a fiscal year, how we operate on a budget. So for budgeting purposes, it is helpful to have it start on a July 1st. we did look, kind of as we were discussing with staff, okay, do you do, I don't know, let's just say hypothetically, $1.60 to $1.75 or something this year on July 1st, and then next year, you know what I mean, go to the $2. But there is kind of a long lead up to and requires significant changes, say on the back end of our fare box and things that we thought it'd be best to do it kind of once and then not hit people with a secondary increase. So that was kind of our thinking on that. We also, whenever we make a fare change, do need to at least do it 90 days out. That's what the lead time you have to give Clipper in order to make that increase. So if we would pass it today, we would basically let them know almost immediately, and they need April, May, and June to implement it. So it couldn't happen sooner, I guess.
All right, just one more question. This is for Antonio, I suppose. I noticed on your presentation in the, on the budget that I think 4% of the fare box recovery goes to administration, and maybe I'm mistaking that, but I think I saw a 4% number there. Is that the general fund administration?
That's the administration of transit services. So it's
Okay.
not 4% of fare box, it's just
No.
4% overall of.
4% of the entire budget. I'm sorry, and I misspoke, and I know that the case. What is that for? What are things that are administration of that budget?
That's use of the facilities, utilities. Sometimes we have utilities, use of the bus maintenance facility, the portion that goes to each of the transit services line. It's basically overhead.
Thank you for the
Thank you.
questions. Yes, thank you. And Director Eisenberg and then Director Mueller.
Thank you. I was just a little surprised that the fare box was only 4%. That was the other 4% of revenue. But I have a question. Did you do a calculation on what your net gain would be after there would be some loss of ridership due to a fare increase? That's simple economics. There always will be some loss. What do we actually gain from the fare increase?
So on a revenue basis, I did this analysis. So on a revenue basis, we're looking at about $116,000 increase in the first year. Now, that being said, there will be a temporary dip in ridership of about 3%. So to answer the question, it's going to be $116,000 for just the Vine, and plus we have an incremental increase for Vine Go because those rates increase concurrently as well. Does that answer your question? And the 4% fare box is 4% for the entire system. When you look at it on an individual basis, Calistoga, Yountville, and St. Helena, their fare box recovery is 10%, and that's by contract with those services. American Canyon, it's 15%. And for the Vine Transit fixed route service, that is the requirement is 15%. We've been struggling. So last fiscal year, it was about 11%. So we're not there yet. And that kind of compels us for the need to, it's not sustainable. And that is compelling this need to increase fares, which we haven't done in the last 10 years. And if we don't, may have to start thinking about service reductions, which we don't want to get into that discussion yet. And that's a last resort. But so we're trying to make some inroads into how we can increase fare box and understand that there will be a temporary dip in passengers, but that is temporary, and we should see a recovery within a year.
Yeah, well, I would concur with Director Doring's idea of delaying, because we're right now in a period of trying to recover ridership. And it might be a good idea to get a little recovery first before risking an increased decrease in ridership. That was poorly stated.
I mean, I see your point. I mean, we have not seen, for example, let's just say we've done like a free day for Earth Day or something along those lines. We don't see like, you know what I mean, a big dip. Or if suddenly we gave like a 50% off, it doesn't seem to be that, price sensitive at the end of the day.
Thank you. Director Mueller.
I'm gonna also kind of weigh in on some kind of a delay here. I think we really need to probably give this a more kind of detailed look. So one of my questions is, you mentioned that you didn't want to do advertising. Advertising kind of contributed 12% to the overall. total, and you don't want to do it because you don't want to put signs on new buses. So let's just say we put new signs on new buses. What kind of amount is that? Are we talking about?
Yeah. So
I have a hard time doing 12% of 870 and the percent that actually goes of new buses. So if you could do the math for me, I'd appreciate it.
Don't know exactly on a per bus basis, but I would tell you with our current contract, we have a base amount that the advertiser gives to us on an annual amount. And then depending on the amount of sales for the advertising that they're allowed to place on our buses and our shelters, then they'll give us basically an extra check, a commission check. And that amount was about, that I said like 118,000 last year. Prior to that, it was about 80,000. So it's kind of volatile. You know, it just depends on the campaigns that the vendor is able to provide. So it's not getting 118,000 this next year or even more. I wouldn't make that assumption just because I don't know what that looks like. I just know what the base amount is, and then we don't know what the extra check is until after the fiscal year is over. I will just.
But it's basically six figures. Is that?
It was last year, but before that, it was 5 figures. I don't know what it will be for this year. It just depends on what the amount of advertising.
So you could probably calculate a best guess range if we would like to see it.
We could do that analysis, right?
Okay.
But again, it's not reliable, and I would hate to rely on advertising revenues to fill in the gap. It's just, right now, the costs are just heavily outweighing. I mean, the purpose of this increase is because costs have increased 43% over the last 10 years. Revenue, fare box has been struggling, and there really is no way out of this.
Totally understand that. So I saw the numbers. I'm just.
Yeah. Okay.
Giving this a little more thorough thought. And also, can you just one more time go through your justification for putting all of this in year one in a 2-year budget and not doing it in increments?
It's probably, I'd have to relook at the budgets and perhaps, break it up. But the initial assumption was, yeah, that's what was in the budget. So I can probably have to take a second look at that.
Okay, so we could do some budget evaluation and also some guesstimates for advertising. Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. Oh, go ahead, Rebecca.
I guess I just want to keep it in perspective with this idea. So we're at the 5% fare box recovery ratio. The Transportation Development Act funds, which you saw represent roughly a third of our budget, right? We need to get up to a 15% fare box recovery ratio if that is on target to be reinstituted in 2026. So it's going to take revenues from fares. It's going to take revenues, additional advertising, whether or not we decide to advertise, say, on the back of the electric vehicles, for example, or we look at other ways we could get additional advertising revenue at additional shelters and say our website and things. So it's going to take a couple of different things. And I guess the timing of it now is to try to get us very close to that 15% in 2026. And I'm not sure if I want to lose the entire fiscal year of 24, 25, and then be grasping at straws with 6 months left to hit that in 2026. So that's kind of my concern.
So the unintended consequence if we don't move forward would be?
If the TDA is not extended where we don't have to meet the fare box recovery ratio, we wouldn't meet the fare box recovery ratio in 2026. And then we'd get a decrease in the amount of TDA funds we would get for our operations.
Correct. And TDA is a significant portion, 30% of our revenue.
It's budgeted around 30% this year, but it's been as high as 45 to 50%.
So it's a significant, it'll be a
And
significant
are you
loss.
factoring state transit assistance because it's both fund sources that
Yeah.
would be subjected to this fare box recovery requirement?
Yeah, I just think it's really important. That's why I asked you to kind of extrapolate what the unintended consequence would be. It's not just this, it ripples into a much bigger conversation overall for the organization. A question in terms of the marketing outreach, not marketing on the buses, but the outreach to the public. I know that social services, nonprofit agencies such as Molly's Angels medical centers, the county of Napa, they all give out bus passes to their clients. Have we reached out to those agencies so they also know and they can adjust their own budgets? And then what's the overall public outreach that we're doing in terms of education between now and July 1st if we move forward?
Sure. So kind of leading up to this, what we've done is we've done kind of advertising directly on our buses, right? We've had signage on our buses that let people know that we were going to be presenting originally to the board in February, and to get any comments they have, trying to get the concerns out. So we're trying to directly reach our riders that way. Everything in English, Spanish, and Tagalog. We did do advertisements in La Voz, which is like an English Spanish community publication for the North Bay of San Francisco. It's been on our website in a very kind of prevalent area, and letting them know, advertised in the register, and then just tried to have individual conversations with whether it be Molly's Angels or the county, just kind of let them know what we're thinking. I don't want to say obviously, but the county is not going to necessarily come here, write and comment. But moving forward, we would make it very clear for them on their budget, so they're planning for next fiscal year.
Thank you. I think that's going to be really important because so many of those agencies do supplement, the cost for transportation for their patients and their clients. So it won't be just the individual that's on a fixed income, which I know we're being very mindful of and concerned about, but there is support out there also. And then also I just want to make a reminder too that under the recommendation on page 61, it does show that the committee recommendation, meaning the Paratransit Coordinating Council, PCC, on January 11th, 2024, as well as the Citizens Advisory Committee, CAC, on January 3rd, recommended that this proposed fare increase to the NVTA board for approval. So we do have 2 other committees that reviewed this and are making this recommendation to us to approve. Yes, Director Shuto.
Thank you. I did note that as well and was happy to see that that was on there for the decision today. We did have a lot of comments, or a couple comments last time, about making sure that people didn't get left behind, for lack of better words, who can't afford the fare increase. And I know there's that statistic for the 3%. Could you help me understand what happens when somebody can't afford that and reaches out to us? Do we then connect them with the places that can help with the pass? Do we have a program to help those people? How does that work?
Yeah, I guess a couple of different things, like within our organization, for example, and within kind of the greater Bay Area, they can qualify for a 50% discount if they meet a certain percentage of area median income, through the Clipper Start program. So that would be kind of the first thing, and you can apply for that kind of right down here at our customer service office. And then as well, if someone approaches us and say they're participating in the SNAP program at the county, for example, or a number of the other county health and human services program, we kind of direct them to the individual there who kind of can handle passes and get distributions. Probation has them, Napa Valley College has them. And so it's almost on an individual basis in terms of what services they may be already providing and what we can get, and then kind of automatically through this Clipper Start program.
Sorry, one last follow-up too. Our last summer, wasn't there a program for students to get to ride free? Are we still going to do that this summer? Because I like the timing.
Yeah, no, we did do all summer a student could ride for $20 is basically what we did, and we intend to do that. I was actually just talking with Libby Pay and one of our staff members about kind of rolling that out early and make sure all the schools know ahead of time. So that is a good option still for students. And just to be clear that when someone gets on the bus and if they didn't have the fare, we're not particularly combative, I guess would be the right term. Like, we would let you on the bus without too much further question.
Our drivers are directed not to argue with people.
Thank you. Thank you. And yes, Director Joseph?
Yes, a couple of comments. Number one, I think in American Canyon, and maybe it's some of the shuttles, if we don't meet our fare box ratios, doesn't it also become, the city gets charged for the balance kind of thing?
Yes. So for example, in American Canyon, and it's the same for all the jurisdictions. So on some level, the city of Napa does not contribute, right, to the overall system. If there was a way in the future that either the city of Napa or the county could make a contribution similar to what the other jurisdictions are doing, then that'd be another way to keep fares at this level relatively for long into the future if those jurisdictions would be willing to help.
Okay, so we'll just leave that there for now. The other point is in the discussion, there does appear to be a number of little pots that of monies that people can approach to basically defray some of their transit costs. And I'm wondering, if there's a way to figure out how big that all those little pots are, just from a marketing perspective. It's almost like saying, rather than come on there and show up with your $2, let's try to work with all the different agencies that are available that have funding to help offset that. Not only is it helping people in need, but from a very, transit centered view, it also allows us to try to recover our fare box ratio if we're getting it from a variety of other sources beyond just people who can't afford it in the first place. So, again, is that enough to make us significant? I don't know, but it becomes a strategy to look at. And then lastly, as a shameless plug, I believe Measure U has some fundings built in to help subsidize some of the transit fares. So that might be a strategy, say, in November.
Thank you.
Those funds are intended to backfill what MTC only has so much budget for the Clipper Start program. And we wanted to make sure that we were able to sustain that program, and that would be the purpose of those funds.
Well, help.
And the board can direct otherwise, but that is sort of what staff was thinking.
Thank you. Director Garcia.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate the discussion we're having on this issue. I think it's important to emphasize that our fare box recovery is reflected on state funding we will get. And yes, I think it's a way to assure that local agencies are doing what they can to meet their operating budgets from the state. So yeah, it's a big pot of money. I don't recall how much it is at the moment, but it's a very large percentage, probably the largest of it, keeping it viable. I think probably would be helpful for us if we had some way of informing everybody of the opportunities for reduced fare. And, like a one-stop spot that everyone can go to say, hey, look, this is what's available for these categories. But we do need to keep it up. I do recall having been at this for some years, I think since about 2006. 17% was seen back then as the threshold level. You have to be above 17% to receive the maximum amount you can get from the state. If we drop below that, we're going to get less money. And if we keep lowering it, we're just circling the drain. So how do we keep the transit system viable? We have to have some way of paying for that service. And part of it is our fare box recovery program. That's my comment. I appreciate everyone's thought on it.
Garcia. Okay. So I think that many of us have had a moment to offer questions and comments. I'm going to bring this back, that this is an action item, and to see if we have a motion to move forward and approve the staff recommendation, which is the Napa Valley Transportation Authority Board of Directors approve the proposed Vine and Vine Go fare increase.
Should we allow any public comment?
Thank you.
I
Yes,
don't
we
know if
should.
there is any, but.
No, absolutely. Thank you. Is there any public comment? Okay, good. Well, we checked that box. Thanks for the reminder. So going back to the motion, do we have a motion? Director
Motion to
Garcia?
approve, Garcia.
Okay, we have a motion by Garcia. Do we have a second?
I'll second, Joseph.
We have a second. I'm going to go ahead and, why don't we do a roll call vote on this? Just because I think it might help.
Leon Garcia, Mark Joseph,
Yes.
Kevin Eisenberg,
Yes.
Liz Alessio,
Yes.
Scott Sedgley,
Sympathize with some of the comments, but I'm going to go yes because let's keep patients crossed. Sorry for the mic. Yes.
Ryan Gregory,
Yes.
Paul Doring.
No.
Anna Shuto. Yes. Margie Mueller,
No.
Robin McKee Camp,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Moving on to 11.2 and just kind of doing our time check here. We're a little bit behind time, but not too bad. 11.2 is to accept and file staff recommendation. So therefore, this is an action item. Napa Valley Transportation Authority Annual Financial Statement with Independent Auditors Report for the years ended in June 30, 2023 and 2022, and a single audit report of uniform guidance. Antonio Honorado is going to present this, pages 85 through 184.
Actually,
And just so we know, we do have a couple board members that will be departing
Yeah.
no later than 3:40.
actually, Chair Alessio, I am mindful of the time, and it's okay if we defer this item to next month. If
Will this take a long time?
I
It
do
won't
have
take
a
a long time. I'd say we
presentation.
go ahead and do it.
It'll take about 5-6 minutes, I would
That's
think.
fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for offering, though.
Okay, so for this item, staff is asking the board to accept and file the financial statements and independent audit report for fiscal years 23 and 22, and the single audit report for uniform guidance for the year ending June 30th, 2023, and return an allocation surplus of $3,534,631 to the local transportation fund. Next slide, please. So this provides a 3-year overview of the agency's operations, a 3-year snapshot. As you can see, since fiscal year 21, revenues have jumped from 17.7 million to 31.1 million. On the other side of the coin, agency expenses have also shot up as well, from about 20.7 million to over 32.1 million. This is mainly due to the agency increasing its assets portfolio. And of course, when I say asset portfolio, I do mean the bus maintenance facility. When all is said and done, the bus maintenance facility will add nearly 35 million in agency assets, less any depreciation and other loan obligations, of course. So NVTA is also delivering 2 other marquee projects, South School Junction and the Vine Trail, but those are not agency assets. So unfortunately, they only provide an incremental financial increase to the agency's operations, but doesn't increase the agency's assets itself. However, the agency's total net position has increased from 23.3 million in fiscal year 21, a little over 2 years ago, to up to $40 million today. And as I mentioned, the reason for that is mainly because we have a brand new shiny maintenance facility just down the street. Next slide, please. So this provides a snapshot. It's in the financial audit. You can peruse the audit at your leisure outside of this meeting, but it does show for the CMA, our general fund, the changes in revenues and expenses year over year from the current year 23 to the previous year. As I mentioned, revenues have increased and also expenses have increased. And the reason for that is the professional services. And a large chunk of that professional services is the Vine Trail. So is the revenues that we generate for the Vine Trail as well as the expenses for the Vine Trail itself. That being said, we did increase agency's assets by about $654,000 for the general fund. Next slide, please. I like to show pie charts just to show you what the balance of revenues versus expenses look like. Because of the Vine Trail, our revenues are a little bit more balanced. We get, from the feds, mainly for the Vine Trail. It's about 30% of our revenue generations. Transportation Development Act can be used for both transportation and transit purposes. That compose about the same amount, 37%. State and local resources, about 8%. Other revenues, and when I say other revenues, I'm talking like the Vine Trail Coalition or county contributions for the Vine Trail. Vine Trail tends to be a repeating
The gift that keeps giving.
project. At least for this year, for the year you're talking about. So that's what's in other revenues. And on the expense side, consulting services, we outsource a lot of our transportation project and program, Vine Trail, for example. But most of the expenses went towards professional fees and consulting services. Personnel made about 24% of the costs, and admin overhead expenses to run the agency operations rounds it out with about 6% of the total expenses for the general fund. Next slide, please. On the general fund, we have 2 major long-term liabilities: our pension funding, our CalPERS funding for retirement benefits, as well as other post-employment benefits funding. Happy to say, in terms of the CalPERS pension funding, we're funded about 73%. Now, it would be nice if it had 100% funding, but this is over a 30-year amortization period. So actually 73% is pretty good. It's a pretty good spot to be in. Anything more than that, you're just not getting the rate of return of what your contributions are. Anything less than that, obviously, you're probably a little bit over leveraged and your liabilities are outpacing what you're able to pay. So 73% for this agency is actually in a good position. In terms of our OPEB funding, we're usually funded about 100%. We always, on a yearly annual basis, we fund our actuarial contribution. The fund itself has gone down a little bit, but that's because of investment earnings from the stock market. Just didn't return the investment earnings in the previous year that it has done in the years before that. That being said, this year is probably going to be a good stock market year, so that should flip back over to full funding for our OPEB obligations. That fund, we actually haven't had any disbursements from that. We've allowed the earnings and the contributions to grow, and we have about 3 active retirees, but those are manageable costs that we're able to pay for through the general fund and not through the OPEB fund itself at this point. And at some point in time, we will start dispersing OPEB trust funds out of the OPEB account and not from general fund sources. But right now it's manageable. Next slide, please. For our transit fund, this is a statement of revenue expenses. It's in the financial statements. I won't go through it too much. Again, you can see over the previous period, fare box has increased about 40%, but you are talking about struggling with our passengers and our from the lingering effects of the pandemic. We had not restored a lot of those passengers that we've lost because of that. Costs have increasing. Our purchase transportation contract, we've had to amend that a couple of times to attract drivers. We've been suffering from driver shortages, and fuel costs are still going up. That being said, we do have 7 electric buses. Comparatively, the cost to fill an electric bus with fuel for electricity as fuel is about half the price of what you would get for diesel or unleaded. So there will be a cost savings, but that won't occur until much, much later, until we are able to convert more of the fleet to a zero emission bus fleet rather than a majority of diesel and unleaded fueled fleet right now. So the costs are still going up. Retail prices for fuel, we buy the same retail prices than anybody else. Those costs are still going up. So the trend for fuel costs will still increase for another year or two before we start seeing some real savings through that. In terms of capital contributions, that is for the bus maintenance facility, which is going to, we'll have additional capital contributions for this year in 2024, but those contributions will taper down in future years because we don't have any very large agency projects on the horizon just yet. So that being said, let's go on to the next slide, please. Pie chart of where the revenues are coming from, just to give you a little bit more of a visual and where the cost goes towards. Again, revenues right now, because of the bipartisan infrastructure law, we have a nice bump in federal sources of revenues, increasing about 20 to 30% from previous years. TDA makes up about 1/3 of our operating revenues, and other revenue sources, these are one-time, these are regional measure 2, regional measure 3. Those are batched up in other resources, and state funding sources, state transit assistance makes up about 10%. Fare box on a combined basis is about, when you look at it on a combined basis for the year, is about 6%. On an individual basis, obviously that differs depending on the transit type of services. But for accounting purposes, for the financial statements, it's about 6% of our revenues and where the expenses go. Obviously, the biggest cost driver is purchase transportation. Fuel and maintenance costs are the second biggest cost drivers. We have depreciation there, but that's an accounting charge, and that's why I always separate it out. It really doesn't go towards anything other than our financial statements, and admin and personnel costs round out the rest of the expenses for transit. Next slide, please.
Yeah, we only have a couple more minutes before
Okay,
we lose two more
this is
members.
the last slide. So,
Thank you.
capital investments, MOLA Park and Ride, we bought some electric buses, Pine Transit Maintenance Facility, and equipment, management letter, another clean audit, no current year findings or recommendations. That concludes my report.
Excellent. Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments? Do we have any public comment? We do not. Do we have a motion to accept and file this report?
I'll make that motion.
Joseph and Gregory seconds, even though Doring had his light on. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, that's unanimous. This has always been the board there. We compete to say who can do the motion in a second. Okay, so we're on to 11.3. This is informational. This is the Vine Transit update. This is the exciting part of our.
Yeah, Rebecca will walk through it pretty quickly.
Thank you. And thank you to Director Gregory and Sedgley. Have a good meeting.
Okay, so to give you a Vine Transit update, we'll be mainly focused on the second quarter of fiscal year 23-24, which is October 1st to December 31st. We were prepared to give this report in February, but we had a lot of items related to Measure U, so we pushed that back. So that's why you're seeing a little bit of delay here. In terms of the jurisdiction updates, just wanted to let you guys know about a couple things that are happening there. So in Calistoga, as you'll see on the next slide, we're looking to reinstate the bus stop at Lincoln and Fairway. Letters were sent to all of the addresses along Lincoln Avenue between Fairway and Washington Avenue, and we submitted an encroachment permit about 6 weeks ago to Caltrans. We received minimal or actually we didn't receive any responses here at NVTA for those letters. So presuming that Caltrans approves our encroachment permit, we would proceed with adding this stop back in, and we'd add it back in at our scheduled June schedule change. The next jurisdiction is in St. Helena. And so same deal, Caltrans encroachment permit. In this case, we want to move the stop from State Route 29 and Pine Street on the southeast corner to the northeast corner. It will help us with the conflict we've had between mirrors and mailboxes at that location. And then also if you're on Pine coming out, making the left, you would no longer have, say, a bus potentially blocking your view. You'd have to get out beyond the bus. If it's at the far side there, it'll make left turns a lot easier coming out of Pine. This was kind of initiated by the City of St. Helena staff. And actually today we got approval of the Caltrans encroachment permit. So we'll probably move forward with this in the next few weeks. On our next jurisdiction in the city of Napa, we did receive an encroachment permit and removed 4 wooden shelters in the city of Napa. You might not be able to tell from the picture here, but it had 4 legs and some of them were going at angles that didn't take a structural engineer to tell you that those were at risk of falling. So we went ahead and removed those. Benches and signs remain and those stops are in place. I would also just add in terms of the city of Napa, just because it's a good joint project, is the city of Napa submitted an affordable housing and sustainable communities grant just this past week for a housing development at Old Sonoma Road. There's also a fund, if part of that funding package, if we receive that grant, we would get funding for some bus stop improvements. The city would get funding for some transit signal priority improvements along Jefferson, and it's a former county site, so it feels like maybe a win-win across all jurisdictions there. The next jurisdiction is American Canyon, and we did issue a notice to proceed to Bear Electric for transit signal priority installation. Not something you'll really see, but it'd be hardware that goes in our buses, hardware in the boxes at 5 intersections in American Canyon, which would, if our bus is running behind, hold the green light for a few seconds to make us stay on time and on schedule. So look for the rollout of that this summer, but hopefully you don't even notice it unless you hear it from me. It'll be pretty seamless. The next thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was the Napa County Older Adults Needs Assessment. And county's not here, but they've probably seen this. They did a really extensive survey over a 3+ month period. They had about 1,250 respondents. They answered each person over 150 questions, all these topics. transportation just being one of them. So just wanted to highlight two questions. Not going to go through all 150, but on the next slide, you'll see kind of what types of forms of transportation that they use. So over 50% are still utilizing, they say, their own vehicle, but we did in this pot get basically 72 people that were riding the Vine in this survey result and 17 that were riding paratransit. So it was interesting to see their survey results. And on the next slide, there was also an additional thought place where 181 people wrote in of that pool of approximately 2,200 about their additional thoughts. And so many of these were written out, but I kind of categorized them into a few. So just wanted to call out, right, there was a concern, the largest number of write-ins was about transportation to the airport. Director Pedroza had recently mentioned that MTC was increasing its funding for the Route 29. And so there may be some possibilities there for Saturday or Sunday Route 29 service, which could address that need. The other thing was down there, about fourth on the list, is they didn't know about any of our services. And so we do have our new communications officer, Emily Cherrier, and we'll be trying to work to address that because not knowing isn't a good situation for us. And on the next slide, I just made a little word bubble about it. Obviously, the more comments about it, the larger the size. And when they say train, they were looking for a train. Not that we can really produce smart, but there was a little bit of interest there. And then the idea of no rural service was usually came from people in Angwin. The next slide just touches on some outreach events we did. It was a women's empowerment event in Spanish for farm workers' wives in January, and then a fun Bel Air kindergarten education event. God bless all of the kindergarten teachers in the world. I don't know how they managed that. I had 48 of them for 35 minutes, and I was just ready to hand them back. But I think they had a lot of fun. On the next slide, just some staff training we've been doing. We went to ChargePoint headquarters, myself and some of the maintenance staff from ChargePoint, or some from TransDev to visit ChargePoint. This is kind of, we learned about the chargers we own and then some future options. Who knows, maybe the one on the right there is a pantograph charger. So you can imagine it comes down, the bus has a panel on top of it. It can charge it. Maybe that'll be out in the transit center in some foreseeable future. We're going to let a few other people try out that scenario though before we might get that one. And then on the next slide, I don't know if it'll come up. It's a short little 8-second video, but this is the activity Saturday morning at our old maintenance facility. I think if you hover over it, it'll play. But it was bumping because we did, and Saturday finish our move to the new facility. And we met with the city of Napa on the kind of nearly vacant site on Tuesday. So we're on track to turn that site over to the city of Napa on May 31st. So see what you guys are going to do. I think for right now, you're going to take down the fence and have some additional public works area, but we're happy to hand that back over to you. And thanks for the multi-year $1 lease. You cannot do any better than that. So thank you for that. And we look forward to seeing you on the 12th, forward to see the new maintenance facility. And then kind of more what we historically include in the transit update. We're looking at our passengers per revenue hour here in the city of Napa, both going back 1 quarter and then 1 year. So we're relatively flat, even though, say, compared to 1 quarter, our ridership did go up slightly because we had additional revenue hours available. We basically stayed flat there. The next slide for this quarter, again, October to December 31st, shows the different routes. Kind of what I would just draw your attention to here is the kind of the Route A on demand furthest on the left-hand side has the lowest passengers per revenue hour. And so all of our other fixed route services are doing better, say, than the on-demand. So I think it does give some credence to our decision to move to some more fixed routes because we can get a higher passenger per revenue hour there. Same deal, it just shows what's happening this quarter on the next slide on our regional routes. And then on the following slide on our on-demand shuttle services, again, on the next slide, call out to American Canyon for its continued strong performance. And then what we see on the next slide is just kind of our ridership trends, right, in the fixed route. And so we know that we are still below, well below our pre-COVID levels. What things that I do want to kind of maybe just emphasize here is if you're looking at the Route 10, for example, and you're going 1 year back, say from blue to orange, that from last year, we're doing better. Same deal on something like the Route 11, but we're seeing again more kind of cyclical changes where, you know, from July to September, it's nice weather. There's no significant holidays. We usually have high ridership and higher ridership. And then in an October to December timeframe, when it will start to rain, when we have holidays, we'd see a decrease. So that's more cyclical. So I'm focusing more on, say, in this quarter, the second quarter of fiscal year 22-23 to second quarter of 23-24. So it looks encouraging on those two routes, but right flat across Route 21, 29, and City of Napa. On the next slide, again, kind of focusing on that same pattern, right? Positive and kind of Vine-Go, Calistoga Shuttle, Yountville B, American Canyon Transit, well, kind of any way that you would slice it, but not so much on the St. Helena Shuttle, looking last year at the same quarter. So we'll have to do more outreach, especially to students there, where our most ridership tends to be in St. Helena. And then finally, and I don't expect you to break this down, but I do just want to show in a regional context. So the Vine, which is represented basically in circles in light beige color. But in 2019, right, if you look where our ridership was on a weekday basis, we were above that of Fast, Smart, City Coach, Petaluma, and Union City. Fast forward to 2022, right, last data MTC had available, we're above all of those plus ACE, but now behind Smart by about 50 passengers per day. So I guess where we are relative to other providers, we've basically stayed in the same spot, minus Smart. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that report. We have a question from Director Eisenberg.
Under 10 seconds. Just mostly a FYI for you. One of the business owners where the bus stop is going to be placed told me how horrible it is and how he's going to be fighting against it. And
Fair enough. No, I would like to get a comment back and yeah, either to us or maybe to oh yeah, no.
The guilty always claim innocence.
Yes. Thank you.
Question I have, and this might be something that we take back to our jurisdictions versus, or maybe it's a partnership. I know, you know, as you talked about removing the shelters, and I understand that one is dilapidated, dangerous. But with climate change comes more extreme heat. And I feel for people who have no shelter over to protect them from that direct sun during those months. Is there a plan to provide some shade for those shelters? I mean, I know that we also have, if we make it too comfortable, some people might move in. We've had that happen too. We have. But, you know, it would be nice to have a shade structure, something over. Is that a discussion or a plan between?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have in both of our upcoming, you know, fiscal year budgets, a certain transit capital line item that basically we try to put shelters in there. We can look at those in particular for locations, look at kind of what their ridership is. So we try to prioritize, you know, where basically shelters go based on ridership and see what we can include in our budget moving forward. Because, right, shelters do make a big difference, and especially the ability to sit down.
Exactly.
Yeah, you don't want them sitting on the curb. That's no fun
People
for
aren't
anyone.
going to wait for a bus a long time, especially if they're like dripping because they're so hot. It's a health issue also, along with an access issue. So I hope we can find a way to create a structure that isn't habitable, but provides, you know, shade for folks. Any other comments or thoughts? No? Okay. Well, thank you. I guess I do have one more thought, and that is at some point, I do hope, and especially with the fare increase, we can look at increasing our stops, because I think that that's a big hindrance for people. We don't have enough frequent stops in those locations that people need. So it just doesn't become like their first choice.
Yeah.
It becomes maybe their last choice. So that would be nice if we can build towards more frequent stops. Thank you so much for that report. So moving on to 11.4, this is informational. It's a federal state legislative update by Executive Director Kate Miller.
Thank you very much, Chair Alessio. Just real quickly, on March 8th, the president signed a $469 billion minibus fiscal year 2024 spending bill that will fund federal agencies through the end of the fiscal year on September 30th. Yay, yay, finally. The Fed funding bill provides about $106.3 billion in total budgetary resources to the DOT. The bill cuts $3.2 billion for the fiscal year 2023 enacted levels across DOT and HUD programs. FHWA got a little bump, FTA got a little cut. The RAISE program was funded about half of what it was in prior years. We're not pursuing a grant this year, but I think the county is for the Vine Trail, so that's not good news. But the $1.1 million for Tole Creek Bridge replacement remains in the bill. So one other item is that Nurio Fernandez, the FTA administrator, retired on February 24th. And I don't know who the acting administrator is at this point, but we will hear soon, I'm sure. Nothing to act on the bill matrix, although we've added AB 2719 Wilson. This is the bill that this is our bill for the CHP truck scale stops, and I will be scheduled, or I am scheduled to testify before the Assembly Transportation Committee on April 1st, and then I had to make a joke, no fooling.
Of course,
So
I was waiting for that.
I'll give you the details on SB 1031, which Director Pedrosa already mentioned. That's the MTC bill, or the Wiener bill that will allow MTC to put a ballot measure on the November 26th ballot for transportation. And I think a lot of things are going to unfold on that, so I don't need to give you the details right now. Happy to give me a call if you're just dying of curiosity. And that concludes my report.
Thank you for that. So the next item is closed session, and I do believe we still have a quorum. Is that correct? Very good. And so would our attorney like to present this?
Yeah, the board's now entering into closed session on the item 12.1, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation for Peters v. Burnham, which is in Napa County Superior Court, case number 23 CV 00.